Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Arna Sahu, host of Arna's News, where on this podcast channel, I aim to eliminate the gender gap in the STEM fields by featuring inspiring female professionals and highlighting their stories and accomplishments to further encourage girls. Today on episode 69.
Why was that? What are you worried about? I think I spent a lot of time in particular worrying about my future. And I think that prevented me sometimes from loosening up and living at a young age because I was so preoccupied with what I was going to do next. And I would say now in my, later years that it's keeping, being relaxed and not thinking that everything has to be about what I'm going to do tomorrow. It's about staying present. And so I would say to my younger self, live a little and don't worry. It doesn't mean don't try, but also don't be preoccupied with what tomorrow will bring, because it's the seeds that you plant now that make the difference later.
Today on episode 69, I'm pleased to announce our guest, Amy Slater. As a vice president, GSI Global Sales at Genesis, she has had the honor of working for some of the greatest brands in technology, such as Palo Alto Networks, AT&T, Campbell and Wireless, Cisco, Salesforce.com, Rovi, and TiVo. As a public speaker at various venues, such as the 2014 Forrester Research Convention, panelist at the Doma Women in Business Tour, featured speaker in the 2016 Aptus Accelerate Conference in San Francisco, and at the 2016 LinkedIn Sales Connect Conference in New York, she brings to the table discussions about being on the other side of sales as a buyer and exposes what salespeople really ought to know about their customers. So thank you so much, Amy, for being here today. Before we dive into the questions, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Arna. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you reaching out to me to have this informative discussion. And so I've been in technology, sales, and sales leadership positions for a long time. I like to use the word 3, but it's 3 decades. 3 is smaller than 30. So, and throughout that, I've had a pretty exciting journey, meeting some great people, learning from some insightful leaders, both male and female. And I'm thrilled to have a chance to speak with you today.
Thank you so much. So my first question for you is, tell us a bit about your career path.
Sure. So I'd like to say, my career path certainly wasn't linear. I think oftentimes it's maybe misleading that people think that your career goes from, point A to point B to C, et cetera, and you just keep moving in a linear path. I would say my career has been a web. It has not been linear. And I like to say that my career has traversed the network. And certainly over the last 30 years, technology has gone in a lot of amazing directions that we never thought would be possible. And I started my career selling long distance. Back in the day, Arna, it actually cost money to call, sometimes even across the street. Those were the days also of payphones and calling cards and all of that. So that's really how I broke into sales, was selling long distance to businesses, essentially door to door. And from there, I knew right away after being an individual seller that I wanted to go into management. And so pretty early in my career, I went into management and again, staying in that space of telecommunications and leading direct sales teams in the sales process, working with customers on their technology requirements. Started out on a voice standpoint, and then I moved into selling data solutions and managing teams around data, and then moved into hardware. And that's really when I jumped over and started selling at Cisco. And the interesting thing, and I say this about careers, is in order to make steps forward, sometimes you have to take a step back. So when I went to Cisco, I had been a sales leader. I was a director of sales, and I had been a sales leader for many years. But when I went to Cisco, in the hiring process, they said, you need to go back to being an individual contributor if you want to work here. You have to carry a quota of Cisco equipment. And I had to check my ego at the door. And sometimes that's a hard thing to do because I was on a pretty fast trajectory up the leadership ladder, but I took a step back. And it was one of the best decisions I made in my career because I got into a new part of technology and I learned it really well. And so that was really a pivotal time in my career when I took a step back to move forward. And so after being at Cisco, I moved into leadership positions. I moved back into leadership after a few years selling there. And then I moved on. And that's when I left Cisco and I went to salesforce.com. And that's when I moved into the cloud, which we hear so much about, the cloud and the internet and all of that. And so I've had various leadership positions, whether it was direct sales. I also moved on from Salesforce, had opportunities to do sales operations, so to understand the back office of sales. So all the while being in a sales ecosystem, spent a number of years more recently at Palo Alto Networks, leading teams around cybersecurity and understanding that and understanding go-to-market strategy and how important cybersecurity is. And then had the good fortune of landing where I am today, which is at Genesys. And I'm in a new role at Genesys from in the last 4 weeks, leading the strategy around our GSIs, which for those of you listening who may not know, GSIs would be large consulting type firms who really look at the overall transformation of business, Accenture, Deloitte, IBM, companies like that, leading the teams where we partner with them around our Genesys solutions.
I absolutely loved what you said. In order to take a step forward, you have to take a step back sometimes. And honestly, it's really hard to let our ego just like be off to the side and take that step back. But you were like climbing the leadership positions, climbing the corporate ladder, but you had to move back to being an individual contributor, but you took that step and from here you are, you've had a different perspective in the technology landscape, and you probably had more success than you would have had if you didn't take that step. So honestly, in order to get to some good place, you might have to take a few steps back, and that's definitely okay.
Exactly. And it might be backwards. It also might be sideways. You might have to take a lateral move just to move into some different type of responsibilities. So it's to have that open mind. You hear a lot about growth mindset, and it's knowing that I might not be doing this yet, but there's opportunities that are out there. It may just not be today.
Absolutely. And what advice would you give someone wanting to pursue a career similar to yours? And do you have any tips to succeed?
Sure. Kind of in line with what I mentioned about being open-minded and also being vulnerable, that sometimes you might have to take a job that you think is beneath you and that you're better than that. And we all go through those phases that we think we're more qualified sometimes than we are. So I think it's certainly to be open-minded. It's also to do research, do your homework, find out, ask questions. If there's someone who has a job or is in a business that you're interested in, reach out to them, ask them questions, even if it's on LinkedIn. That's how you and I got connected. I didn't know you before you reached out to me, and you never know who will be on the other end. So that comes from also when you look at characteristics is courage. Have the courage and the confidence to ask the questions. No one's expecting you to have all the answers, especially early in your lifetime or early in your career journey. But what people at my level really acknowledge and applaud is someone who might take that risk, someone who has grit and said, you know what, let me shadow you for a day, a week, a month, or what have you. I want to learn about your business, seek out mentors. And so those are some of the tips, I think, is to be curious, and you just never know where the opportunities will come from. It could come from your next door neighbor. It could come from your person who rings up your groceries. You just don't know where the connections will come. I've had people who've reached out to me blindly on LinkedIn, and then I've hired them. I've hired them, maybe not in that moment, but some have, or some have come years later. because they asked. So don't be afraid to ask.
Absolutely. I love that power statement you just said. Don't be afraid to ask because there are so many opportunities out there waiting for you. You just have to have the courage and the grit and the mindset to, be okay if you get a ghost back, if no one replies back to you, or if you get a no. But even if you did reply or if you did send that message to other people, then some great opportunities can be waiting for you with that person. So just have the confidence to shoot that message, to, send that email because there's so many things waiting for you.
Exactly.
All right. And what is a common myth about your profession that you want to debunk?
Sure. I would say a myth, if you look at the overall perception oftentimes of sales, and I have had this conversation many times and had a conversation. I was part of a program with LinkedIn to try to debunk the myth about sales, is that there's always that feeling of kind of the slimy salesman who's, door to door selling Ginsu knives or what have you, right? Or, car sales people get a bad name, get a bad rap. And what we need to look at ourselves is that we're professionals. Sales is a profession. It's not it's people that have learned, have studied, they're educated in their practice, in their trade. And there's also that feeling, and there are several books about it, but everybody sells. Doesn't matter. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, what have you. Everybody sells. You have to. How else do people get clients but to sell? They might sell through different channels, and they maybe aren't going door to door, but they might have some marketing that they have to put into place to sell. And so I would say that that's a huge myth about the sales profession, is that it's kind of slimy, and that people use tactics that lack integrity. Now, doesn't mean that there aren't, but there are people that lack integrity, unfortunately, in every business. It's not something that is characteristic of salespeople, because there are salespeople with tremendous integrity and building of relationships. So I'd say that's kind of the biggest myth that I would say around salespeople.
Absolutely. I mean, there's always going to be that one outlier in a graph. A really big thing that I kind of was kind of icky about when I was doing Girl Scouts, because I had to go door to door to sell Girl Scout cookies, was feeling that other people thought that I was one of those annoying people that kept on knocking at their doors. But honestly, there's just so many things that go behind it. I mean, Girl Scouts is an actual like nonprofit. It's an actual real thing, a real deal. So and you're educated enough to sell things and sell items and talk to people, and the confidence to honestly ask for people to just, ring up their doorbell. There's so many opportunities that lie. It kind of goes back to being confident and asking for whatever you need and just having that mindset to just do it and believe in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I was a Girl Scout also, and a Brownie. And those are the beginnings of these life skills about developing that kind of confidence. It's not just, okay, you're raising money, but it's also to be able to teach younger people
Absolutely.
how to ask for the order.
Yes. And another question I have for you is, if you could step into my shoes or your younger self, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't?
I think I would have asked, why was that? What are you worried about? I think I spent a lot of time in particular worrying about my future. And I think that prevented me sometimes from loosening up and living at a young age, because I was so preoccupied with what I was going to do next. And I would say now in my, later years, that it's keeping, it's being relaxed and not thinking that everything has to be about what I'm going to do tomorrow. It's about staying present. And so I would say to my younger self, live a little and don't worry. It doesn't mean don't try, but also don't be preoccupied with what tomorrow will bring, because it's the seeds that you plant now that make the difference later. And so I think it would have been, I know my mom used to always be really happy actually when she would see my room a little bit messy, because that said to her that I was more relaxed. I happen to be a very tidy person. And so she felt that that was me trying to keep everything in control. And so if it was a little messy, she actually was happy. My sister was, a little messier than I was. But for me, I didn't want to be. But my mom was actually kind of trying to encourage me to loosen up a little bit.
Absolutely. I love that because I'm also a really stubborn person where I always have to think about the next thing in my day. And if things don't go that way, I get really panicky. So just it's a really good thing to just remember that you should loosen up and try to live a little, stop being too preoccupied into those obnoxious or anxious thoughts that you might have because they're really going to mess you up. So just live in the present and don't really worry about the future. That doesn't mean that you should just put your future at a pause or you should just like move it to the side. Of course, it's still going to be there, but also remember that you're still living in the present and you shouldn't make this as a regret for your future self.
Yeah. And one other thing kind of along those lines, Arna, is about being over planned. If you're over planned, there's no room for spontaneity. And I write about this in my book, that, if everything is planned, how can unexpected treasures appear? If you're walking down the street, it just only looking forward and not looking around, you might miss something amazing to your right or something even more amazing to your left if you're only looking straight ahead. Now, certainly if you're walking, you don't want to run into anything, but keep your eyes and ears open to other things because if you're so planned, I used to be worried if I had an opening in my schedule because, oh no, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with that open space? That's scary sometimes. But I've found that sometimes the greatest things happen in an unexpected way, but I can't have those if my schedule is always completely full.
Absolutely. Like there are so many things that can happen to you if you just let your schedule be free and stop overbooking yourself with so many things. Like this is what I do. I kind of overbook myself with so many things. And then when these really fun events happen, I can't really go to them because I'm already overbooked. So I guess this kind of goes back to living a little, live in your present and stop really worrying about those thoughts you have because you have to live right now and don't let this become a regret for your future
Mm-hmm.
self.
Yeah. And be okay with open space.
Absolutely. And my question for you is what are the best resources slash books that have helped you find your career path?
It's interesting because I I don't know that it's necessarily been to help me find my career path per se, because I think that in some respects my path has been fluid. I know books that have impacted me in a certain way that have then impacted the choices I've made that led to my career. Or, some of and some of them have been more recent books. One book I am passionate about is called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And they are really four tenets that actually help not just with how I lead teams, but also in living my life. Things like the fourth agreements, be impeccable with your words. Don't make assumptions. Always do your best. Those are three. And so just those kinds of adages kind of help guide me into making decisions in the workplace. In my day, another book that I really focused on, and it was recommended by my father, who I followed, I think, a little bit in his leadership footsteps. And it's called The 1 Minute Manager. And it was all about just taking that 1 minute where you recognize people and recognize them when they're doing things right. And it's just in a minute. And so that was a book that was quite impactful. An author, and anthropologist, sociologist that I am also excited about is Brene Brown. And she's more recent. And I've read every one of her books, The Gifts of Imperfection, that really helped me realize that there's a lot of learnings that you find in being imperfect, and you don't have to be perfect. She also Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last. So a lot of the books that I've been drawn to in my career haven't necessarily been about my path, but about who I am in my role and the leader that I strive to be.
Yeah, I mean, I really love that because you have so many different books and ideas that you kind of learn and pick up along the way that help you navigate decision making and things like that, which then in turn can help you in so many other types of paths and careers and different types of decision making turns when you have the advice from other people who've done it and other cool books just like those, they really help you along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then in my day too, was, 7 Habits of Highly Successful, people. So that, that's another one, but that's been around a long time.
Absolutely. And my question for you is what do you think is a vital factor that shaped your career? What was your life before learning it? And what was your life after learning it?
I would say, when, well, in my career, I've been, what's called reduction in force, a couple of times. And, it's something that of course has happened a lot more in the last couple of years when we saw huge layoffs with many companies. I've been now on both sides of the riff. I've had to lay people off and I've been laid off myself. And a lot of people don't realize that because it's not something, at least when it wasn't something you actually wanted to tell anybody because you thought it was always a reflection of you. And the second time, each time it happened, my life was better on the other side. Before I went to Cisco, I had gone through a riff, but my Cisco journey changed my life. I was let go years later after a merger and acquisition took place. And I had been just itching to start my own coaching business and consulting. And it happened. And I called my coach because I was working with a coach at the time. And I said, I got laid off. And he said, congratulations. What do you mean? He says, well, now you can go do what you want to do. And so from that, I went and spent a year running my own business, strategy, consulting, and public speaking. And that's when I became more of a public speaker. And I did a lot of different podcasts and things like that. And so what I realized, the life learning, was you may not know what's on the other side, but every time it actually was better. It was better on the other side of what I had been on. And you don't realize it until it happens, and it's hard. And the learning is that you have to go through it. And I also learned it's not glorious on the other side either, when you have to let other people go. And you can't really tell them at the time that, oh, it's going to be better later, because that doesn't show empathy. But I have been there, and I do know that it's hard, but I was always better at the other side.
Absolutely. A really cool thing that I saw on Wall Street Journal a few days ago was expansions last longer than contractions. So when things go wrong and everything, a really good thing to know, which is kind of hard to realize, is that the good things are going to last longer than the bad things. And although it might seem a little shallow if you say that to someone who's actually suffering, just know that at the other side, when you're done with that negative pause in your life, there's going to be such good things happening, and these opportunities will come to you. They're not going to be predictable because, things just aren't always predictable. But as long as you have the free schedule and you live in the present, you will definitely be there one day.
Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like grief. When we all experience some kind of grief, whether you lose a job, you lose a family member, someone who passes away, that there's that feeling that grief is you're never going to get past it, but you do. And it doesn't mean you forget that person or you forget that experience. You just have the opportunity to live beyond where you were.
Absolutely. And because we have some additional time, my question for you is what's one thing you wish you had known when you began your career path?
I guess I wish I had known that it was okay to take a pause, that I wasn't in such a hurry. What was I in such a hurry for? That's one thing. I look at my own children. I'm a mother of 3 daughters, and 28, 26, and 18. And, that I was so concerned initially as a parent, like, get a job when you're out of school. And they did. And my older two daughters did get jobs and good jobs and things. And then one of them decided to take some time off. It was the most amazing thing. And to watch her grow and develop in that open space. And so I wish that when I had been their ages, that I had realized that it was okay to take a pause. And I don't need to be in such a hurry. And the other thing is, and when I do some mentoring of, younger folks, is that there isn't a prescription or a recipe that says, if you do this, then this will happen. And if you do that, then that will happen. It is not that simple. It's actually much more complex than that, and actually much more exciting than just, if you do this. Now, certainly, if you do certain things, you're more likely to get a job or a career. But I'd say it's, I would have said to myself that I'm not in a hurry, to be patient, and it's okay not to know. It's okay not to know, what you want to do when you grow up. First of all, we don't grow up and you don't know what you want to do. I had no idea that this would be my career. It has worked out that way. And to me, my career and my personal life, I'm still the same person. And I think that's what's important, that I would want people to walk away from after me having a conversation, is that you're one person, you're one persona. Live that. And then your work, if you do that, then your work will follow. I don't want to be two different people. I'm one way at work and one way at home. I'm the same way, whether I'm at home or I'm at work. I try to be, at least.
Absolutely. I love that, because it's great and it's okay to have an open space and open schedule to learn and grow. If you need that, then it's definitely okay. Don't limit yourself to the different pauses that you might need, because often the best opportunities come from taking a pause and really enjoying and soaking in the moments of life that you're having right now. Kind of like what we said before in this episode. So don't be afraid to kind of take that moment and take that pause if you need it, because that's going to give you so much more happiness and room to grow, which is so much more important.
Absolutely.
And my last question for you is, how do you continue to learn in order to stay on top of things within your role?
Yeah, it's asking questions, talking to people who know different things than I do. I learn every day, every single day. Also changing roles keeps you on your toes so that you don't get complacent. I read a lot of articles and information, not, probably more so than books sometimes, because books take a bigger commitment. But I stay, look at a lot of news on LinkedIn that may be relevant to our industry. Certainly different things related to technology, and now, of course, customer experience and contact center. I just read a lot of little bits of information and ask a lot of questions from people who know a lot of things that I don't know. I will probably go to, if I have a graver, or anyways, I'll go learning every single day until I can't.
I love that. And before we end off, do you have any last words to the audience?
Yes, I would just say, if you are interested in learning more, you certainly can reach out to me via LinkedIn, Amy Slater. Always willing to have a little chat if there's something that's meaningful. I make the time. We don't have endless amounts of time, but if it's important, I will make the time. And or if you want to also learn more, you can go to Amazon, and where I wrote a book called Moments, Magic, Miracles, and Martinis: How to Move Forward in Times of Uncertainty.
Thank you so much, Amy. And I absolutely love talking to you.
Thanks, Arna.
And here are my 3 cents on this episode with Amy. 1, career path is not linear. She emphasizes that her career path was not a straightforward journey from point A to point B. She emphasized that sometimes taking a step back or pursuing sideways or lateral opportunities can be instrumental in personal and professional growth. This highlights the importance of flexibility and adaptability in one's career. 2. Networking and seeking opportunities. Amy advises aspiring professionals to be proactive in networking and seeking opportunities. She encourages reaching out to people in roles of interest, being curious, and not being afraid to ask questions. Building connections and seeking mentorship can lead to unexpected opportunities in the future. And 3. Challenging stereotypes. Amy challenges the stereotype that sales professionals are slimy or lack integrity. She emphasizes that sales is a legitimate profession that requires education and skill. This is a reminder that preconceived notions about certain professions should be questioned, and individuals should be evaluated based on their actions and ethics. Thus, that concludes the episode for this week. If you want to know more about how I relate to these amazing topics, then stay tuned for upcoming episodes. A free way to support this show is by leaving it a 5-star rating and a review on the player you are listening to. Let me know what you enjoy about this podcast, as it's a chance to tell me what you love about the show, and it helps others discover it too. Once again, thank you for finding me, and I hope we stay in touch with each other. Zito, you're listening to Arna Sahu, the host of Arna's News. Toodles!